Howdy, today Flippin Science, we're looking at exchange surfaces.
So give me all of you in exchange for me. Just give me all of you in exchange for me. For me. For real, shot.
So the science understandings we're going to look at: multicellular organisms exchange materials with their environment, and exchange surfaces in an organism must be thin, moist, and have a large surface area, and in animals have a rich blood supply. So we've had a look at how cells make up tissues, tissues make up organs, and organs make up systems. The question is, why do we bother having organs and systems? So the reason why we need to have specialized organs and systems is because our cells aren't all in the same location. A cell in your toe is very far away from your lungs, so it's very hard for a toe cell to get oxygen into it unless you have a system that can transport materials to that toe cell. So almost all the cells in your body are too far away from the external environment to do exchange. Your cells need to be able to do exchange so they can take in materials that they need and get rid of waste products that they don't. So by having these specialized organs and organ systems, every cell can get what it needs and get rid of its waste products. So if we have a look at down here, we've got an example. Here we have, say, liver cells. Liver cells need to get oxygen into them. They need to get rid of waste products. The way they get oxygen into them is we have a system where we have lungs that are hooked up to a circulatory system that can take oxygen to those cells. So we're going to look at specialized exchange organs and surfaces that exist in animals. Particularly we're going to look at humans. We will mention leaves in plants as well, but we'll go into plants in a lot more detail later on. Exchange organs and surfaces. So the exchange surface is the villi in the small intestine, and that's in the digestive system. So its job is to take in nutrients from food and distribute that around the body. Alveoli in the lungs. So the exchange surface is the alveoli, the organ is the lungs, and the system is the respiratory system. So here's the alveoli down here. Their job is to get oxygen into the body and carbon dioxide out of the body. Nephrons in the kidneys. So here we have a nephron. The exchange surface is the nephron, specifically the surface of the tubules. The organ is the kidney and the system is the excretory system. The job is to filter out waste products from the blood and to get rid of those waste products. And leaves in plants, their job is to exchange gases, similar to what we have with lungs. Except instead of taking in oxygen and giving off carbon dioxide, they take in carbon dioxide and give off oxygen, as well as water, which is produced from photosynthesis. So these are examples of exchange surfaces and organs as parts of systems. So for each of those surfaces that we've talked about, they have specific features that allow them to exchange materials with the environment efficiently. They're thin, they're moist, they have a large surface area, and they have a large blood supply in animals. So let's have a look through these features and see why they're handy if you want to increase the rate of exchange. So if your exchange surfaces are thin, that means that the distance that materials have to travel over is low. And that means that that exchange can happen faster since the materials don't have to move as far. So let's look at an example in the villi. So here you have your small intestine. On the small intestine we have the villi, and on the surface of the villi we have microvilli, which are even smaller. The surface of the microvilli are one cell thick, and that means that any material that's coming in, for example simple sugars, amino acids, they only have to travel over one cell membrane and then another cell membrane to get into the system, to get into the circulatory system, the network of capillaries that's underneath. So the materials only have to go through one surface, then another surface, then they're in. If we had multiple cell layers, that would mean they'd have to go in and out, in and out, in and out before they can get into the circulatory system, and that would take too long. So by having a thin membrane that the materials have to exchange over, you get faster exchange occurring. The materials that we're talking about that are being exchanged, generally speaking, they're water soluble. What that means is if you want to exchange from one space to another, you have to dissolve them into water on both sides. So in order to do that, your exchange surfaces have to be moist. So a good example here is the alveoli. So in the alveoli, you're taking in oxygen into your body and getting rid of carbon dioxide. Both oxygen and carbon dioxide are soluble to a certain extent in water. So on the surface of the alveoli, you have this liquid layer that allows the oxygen to dissolve into that liquid, and then it can pass through the membrane and into the capillary. The carbon dioxide on the other side is already in water, it's in the blood. That exchanges out and then dissolves out of the water that's on the surface and then goes into the gas space. So both of them are water soluble to a certain extent, so they need to dissolve into water before they will be able to be exchanged. If you didn't have this layer of moisture here, you wouldn't get the exchange happening. There's a surfactant that's in that layer of moisture to keep the alveolar spaces open. Premature babies might not necessarily have that layer, so they need to have that surfactant put into their lungs so they can breathe a bit easier. All the exchange surfaces we've talked about also have a large surface area. The larger the surface area, the more area you have for the exchange to occur over. There's multiple examples of these. If we looked at your lungs, for example, each lung is about the size of a tennis court if you could spread it out. Your small intestine is about the same size, again, a tennis court. So that's a huge area for exchange to occur over. Another good example of this is the microvilli and nephron tubules. So if we have a look at the tubule in the nephron, so this is the proximal convoluted tubule, the cells that are lining the tubule, they have this microvilli on the surface. We can see the microvilli here. Each of those microvilli, they increase the surface area. If this was flat, we would have a particular surface, but by having the microvilli present, we increase that surface area, because now we have a bit of up, a bit of down, a bit of up, a bit of down, so a bit more space for the exchange to occur over. This is present in the other exchange surfaces too. We have villi and microvilli present in the small intestine, and the alveoli in the lungs, they also increase the surface area significantly. So, by increasing the area over which exchange can occur, you increase the rate of exchange, and it makes it easier for the exchange to happen. So the last one we're going to look at is large blood supply, and this is present in animals. All the surfaces that we have exchange over have to have a large blood supply because it's the blood that is carrying the materials around the body. So the materials that are being exchanged in and exchanged out, they need to be carried around by the blood. So at your exchange surfaces, you need to have an awful lot of blood there. So if we look at the alveoli, when we normally draw an alveoli, you only draw one capillary going around the alveolus. But there's multiple capillaries all over the place. There's a really high blood supply to the lungs. We can see the heart is right next to the lungs, and one side of the heart is dedicated to just pumping blood to the lungs. So the blood with low oxygen and high carbon dioxide gets pumped directly to the lungs, so a large amount of blood is going to the lungs all the time. And this is true of the other exchange surfaces too. So the small intestine has a large blood supply, the kidneys have a very large blood supply, 20% of the blood from each pump is going directly to your kidneys. So by having a large blood supply, you get a greater speed of exchange of materials into that blood. So today on Flipping Science, we looked at exchange surfaces. That's it for Flipping Science today. See ya!